I remember the exact click of the conference room door as Victor Lang slid the stack of papers across the polished mahogany table without even looking up from his laptop screen. The room smelled like lemon disinfectant and fresh toner, the kind of sterile scent that always lingered after the cleaning crew finished their midnight rounds. My heart didn't race the way you might expect in a moment like that. Instead, it settled into this heavy, knowing rhythm, like the slow tick of a clock counting down to something inevitable. HR has concerns about your attitude, Sarah, Victor said, his voice flat and rehearsed, eyes glued to whatever spreadsheet held his attention. It doesn't align with our team culture anymore. We're letting you go effective immediately. 23 years. That's how long I'd poured my life into Apex Dynamics, a fintech startup that had clawed its way from a cramped loft in Boston's Seaport District to a glass tower overlooking the harbor. 23 years of late nights debugging compliance systems, mediating disputes between developers and regulators, and watching the company evolve from ramen-fueled all-nighters to catered board meetings with venture capital suits. And now this, ambushed in a glass-walled room with the door deliberately left open so the hallway could overhear every word. I didn't argue. I didn't cry or demand explanations. I simply picked up the pen, signed where the tabs indicated, and slid the packet back to him. My face remained calm, almost serene, as I stood and walked out with measured steps. The tile floors echoed under my heels like a metronome, keeping time with my thoughts. Colleagues averted their eyes, some out of pity, others out of fear that association might taint them too. I passed my desk without stopping, grabbed nothing but my purse, and headed for the elevators. Outside, the October wind off the harbor bit at my cheeks as I drove aimlessly at first, then deliberately to a quiet diner in Quincy, 2 towns over. The place had cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox playing old Motown tracks, and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since breakfast. I ordered scrambled eggs and toast I barely touched, staring at the termination packet like it was a puzzle I'd solved years ago. Because I had solved it. Or rather, I'd built the solution into the very document they'd just forced me to sign. Sitting there, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, memories flooded back unbidden. The weight of betrayal settled in my chest, not hot anger, but a cold clarity. Victor Lang, the golden boy promoted 3 times in 5 years, had always dismissed my careful approach as overly cautious or slowing us down. My attitude problem was simply insisting on reading contracts before we signed them with clients, auditing vendor agreements, and reminding everyone that shortcuts in compliance could sink the ship. I hadn't called my husband, Mike, yet. I hadn't texted my sister or even allowed myself the release of tears. Instead, I sat with the packet open to page 6. Section 3. The clause I'd drafted myself in the company's earliest days. The language was plain, buried under layers of standard mutual confidentiality boilerplate. In the event of termination without cause, any forward-looking confidentiality obligation shall be null and void unless expressly reaffirmed in writing by both parties within 30 days of separation. They hadn't changed it. In all the acquisitions, rebrandings, and office moves, no one had bothered to audit the original templates. Victor had simply pulled the old file, swapped in names and dates, and printed. Classic move from a man who valued speed over substance. My eggs grew cold as I traced the words with my finger. This wasn't revenge in the fiery, explosive sense. It was precision. The kind of quiet power that comes from knowing the system better than the people running it. I paid my bill, drove home through the evening traffic, and waited until the house was quiet before opening my laptop. Mike was already asleep upstairs, oblivious for now. I uploaded the signed document to my encrypted personal archive, time-stamped it, hashed it, and backed it up across multiple secure clouds and a physical drive hidden in the basement. The landmine was set. All they had to do was step on it. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fans spinning lazily, the first call came at 2:47 a.m. Blocked number. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice steady in the darkness. The man on the other end introduced himself as outside counsel for Apex. He sounded tense, overly polite, asking if I had signed the exit documents. I confirmed I had. Then I mentioned page 6. Section 3. The silence that followed was deafening, a sharp intake of breath. The sound of papers shuffling frantically on his end.
Oh.
Shit, he muttered before catching himself. I hung up gently. No threats. No gloating. Just the satisfaction of watching the first domino fall in slow motion. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows as I made coffee, the rich aroma grounding me while my mind replayed the early days of Apex dynamics. Back then, in 2012, we operated out of a converted warehouse space near the waterfront, exposed brick walls, mismatched folding chairs, and a single unreliable bathroom that required creative plumbing fixes more than once. I was 35, recently divorced with a young daughter, and hungry to build something meaningful. I handled everything, incorporating the company at the State House, hand-delivering payroll in my beat-up Honda, debugging the first compliance software myself when the IT guy quit suddenly. Victor Lang was still a junior analyst then, fresh out of business school, eager but dismissive of red tape. We worked shoulder to shoulder, sharing cold pizza at midnight while pitching to our first institutional investors. It was during one particularly brutal contractor dispute that I drafted the clause. A vendor had walked away with proprietary algorithms after we parted ways, nearly destroying our seed round. I spent weeks researching at-will employment laws in Massachusetts, consulting templates, and adding protective language that favored fairness over one-sided silence. Page 6. Section 3 was my safety net, a mutual protection against scapegoating or retaliation. It wasn't flashy legalese, it was clear, balanced language designed to hold up in court if ever tested. As the company scaled, moving to sleek offices, hiring layers of middle management, securing Series B funding, no one revisited the foundational documents. New executives assumed prior teams had vetted everything. The clause hibernated quietly, reused in every iteration because templates were sacred in a fast-growth environment. I thought about those days while sipping my coffee, Mike coming downstairs and sensing my mood. We talked quietly over breakfast. He listened as I explained the firing without embellishment, his hand steady on mine. Our daughter, now in college, texted later asking if I was okay. I assured her I was, but inside, the sense of loss mixed with resolve. By afternoon, the second contact arrived, an email from the general counsel, Anika Patel, polite,
Urgent.
requesting I re-execute an updated NDA to correct a discrepancy. The attached document was pristine, with Section 3 gutted and replaced by ironclad perpetual silence clauses, retroactive and superseding. They even bolded the new language like a desperate plea. I didn't respond directly. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney with a simple note. They can't unsign what's already filed. Then I went for a long walk along the harbor, the salt air clearing my head. The panic on their side was building like a storm front. Rushed calls, emergency huddles, I could imagine vividly. They had assumed firing me would erase the threat, but my silence and compliance had activated the clause perfectly. Memories of past colleagues surfaced, the intern who fixed the copier with duct tape, the founder who once cried over missed payroll. Those honest struggles contrasted sharply with Victor's corner office arrogance, his habit of mocking thorough processes as checkbox mentality. My attitude was the very diligence that had kept Apex compliant through regulatory audits and data breaches that plagued competitors. That evening, I reviewed old emails in my personal archive, finding the original drafting notes. The clause's intent was protection, not weaponization, but when misused, it became both. Mike suggested we order takeout and watch something mindless, but my mind stayed sharp, calculating next moves without haste. Patience had always been my strength, now it was my armor. By bedtime, another blocked call came. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from outside counsel again, voice cracking slightly as he requested an immediate discussion. I smiled faintly in the dark. The bungalowed clause was live, and they knew it. The board chair, Judith Hargrove, called mid-morning Friday from her corporate line. No evasion. Her voice carried the measured authority of someone who had steered Apex through 2 recessions and multiple funding rounds. Sarah, we've become aware of an oversight in the documentation from your separation, she said carefully. Each word weighed. I listened without interrupting, letting silence stretch. She continued, acknowledging the abrupt nature of my exit and proposing a private board session to understand and resolve the issue. No apologies. But the invitation spoke volumes, the recognition that they faced a self-inflicted vulnerability. I agreed to Monday at 10 a.m., keeping my tone neutral. Over the weekend, I prepared meticulously, printed clause history, annotated versions, timelines of the company's growth. No drama, just facts. Mike supported quietly, reminding me of my value beyond any title. Sunday evening brought reflection on the human cost, years of loyalty reduced to a single HR flag. Yet the clause represented justice, not vengeance. Monday arrived clear and crisp. The boardroom felt familiar yet charged. Tinted glass. No catering. Just 5 directors. Tired counsel. And unspoken tension. Judith opened politely, gesturing to coffee. I placed my folder down and began methodically, explaining the clause's 2012 origins post-contractor breach, its unchanged status across revisions, and how Victor's rushed paperwork triggered it automatically. A younger director asked directly what I sought. Reinstatement? No, I replied. I want the next person protected. Audit templates. Remove landmines. Ensure policies serve fairness. I slid over my consulting proposal. 3-month contractor term at a fair rate to lead restructuring. They didn't haggle. Judith nodded acceptance by end of day. The meeting ended with quiet acknowledgement. I wasn't the problem, the blind spots were. Leaving. I felt no triumph yet, just the weight of responsibility shifting. That week, changes accelerated. Victor's name vanished from directories. Emails bounced. His parking spot emptied without fanfare. Office whispers spread discreetly. I returned not as employee but contractor, leading sessions with renewed focus. Working alongside Tanya Ruiz. The compliance specialist Victor once belittled as too slow felt poetic. Now head of risk strategy, she welcomed collaboration. We reviewed the draft NDA line by line. Red pen in hand on page 6. The clause remained but softened dangerously. I advocated balance, protection without muzzle. We rewrote collaboratively, clear language safeguarding both sides. Audited against current regulations. Tanya's insight complemented mine, turning correction into progress. No gloating, just 2 professionals mending systemic flaws born of haste. Mid-project, a forwarded Slack screenshot arrived anonymously. Victor urging, push the forms fast. No need for legal review. Pure arrogance captured plainly. I shared it with counsel, no leaks needed. The epilogue confirmed the pattern. Shortcuts, chosen deliberately. Policies evolved visibly, tighter audits, reviewed templates. training emphasizing fine print. The company breathed easier. Blind spots addressed. By project end, the new clause stood balanced, fair, and robust. Tanya and I shared a quiet moment of accomplishment. Victor's departure left no trace, no farewell, just absence. The Slack artifact lingered as cautionary footnote. Reflecting at the harbor one evening, the story raised enduring questions. How often do we undervalue those who lay foundations? What price does arrogance exact when fine print awakens? Apex emerged stronger, but the human cost lingered, loyalty dismissed. Competence sidelined until crisis. I walked away with closure. The clause's lesson etched: read thoroughly, act deliberately, and never assume power shields from consequence. The system corrected itself, but only after nearly breaking under its own haste. In the quiet aftermath, one wondered how many unseen clauses still sleep across corporate America, waiting for the right signature to stir.